When I came home from the hospital, the lilac bush in front of the porch was gone. It took me a moment to notice. The air smelled different, less sweet. For years, that bush had been the first thing I saw after every hard day. Tiny purple petals brushing against the white rail. Bees humming lazily in the sun. But that morning, all that met me was bare dirt and the faint trace of fresh paint on a door that wasn't mine anymore. I stood on the curb with my discharge papers still folded in my trembling hand. The taxi had already pulled away. My house, the place I'd spent 22 years calling home, had a new number plate, a different mailbox, and curtains I didn't recognize. At first, I thought I'd made some kind of mistake. Maybe the medication had me woozy. Maybe I'd told the driver the wrong address. But when a silver SUV pulled into the driveway and a woman stepped out, smiling politely, holding a grocery bag, the truth fell over me like cold water. "Can I help you?" she asked, shifting her purse on her shoulder. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My body felt hollow, light, like I might float right off the sidewalk. "This is my home," I finally managed to whisper. She looked at me with that soft, uncomfortable sympathy strangers use when they think you're confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We bought this house 3 weeks ago. The previous owner said it was a quick sale. Urgent situation," he said. The previous owner, my husband, Thomas. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been lying in a hospital bed, tubes in my arm, trying to stay awake long enough to watch the evening news. It was just a small surgery, they'd said. A routine gallbladder removal. 2 nights, maybe 3, and I'd be home. Thomas had come to visit on the first day. He brought a small bouquet of daisies, supermarket daisies, the kind wrapped in plastic with a 2 for $10 sticker still clinging to the stem. He smiled, but his eyes were restless, darting to his phone every few minutes. "You just rest, honey," he'd said, tapping my hand. "I'll take care of everything at home. Don't you worry." And I hadn't, not then. After all, we'd been married 27 years. We'd raised 2 kids, buried 1 dog, and refinanced the mortgage 3 times together. I'd thought I knew every crease in that man's face. But as I stood outside that house, my house, listening to the stranger tell me about urgent sales and previous owners, I realized I hadn't known him at all. The woman was kind enough to let me sit on the porch steps while I made a few calls. I dialed Thomas's number first, straight to voicemail. Then our daughter, Ruth. She answered on the second ring. "Mom, you're out early. How are you feeling?" Her voice was bright, cheerful, too bright. "Ruth," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sweetheart, where's your father?" A pause. Then, "He didn't tell you." "Tell me what?" Another silence, heavier this time. I could almost hear her swallow. "Mom, maybe you should sit down." I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "I'm already sitting, baby, on someone else's porch." That evening, I ended up at Ruth's apartment, a small, neat place above a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon. She'd already made me tea by the time I got there, and I could see the pity in her eyes before she said a word. "Dad said it was temporary," she began. "He said the bills were piling up, and the house was too much for just you two. He said he'd found a smaller place, somewhere easier to manage." "Without telling me?" I asked. "He said he didn't want to stress you while you were recovering." I stared at the steam rising from the cup, tiny curls vanishing into the air. "He sold our house, Ruth. He sold the only thing we built together." She reached across the table, resting her hand over mine. "He said it was just a financial decision." Financial. Such a clean, empty word for something that felt like being ripped open. That night, I lay on Ruth's couch, watching the ceiling fan spin slow circles. My mind ran through every memory of Thomas. The sound of his laugh when the kids were small, the way he'd hum while fixing the fence, the faint smell of sawdust that clung to him after weekends in the garage. I kept trying to find the moment, the when, that things had changed. Maybe it was after the layoffs at his company 2 years ago. Or maybe when his mother passed and he started spending long evenings running errands. The signs had been there, I realized. I just hadn't wanted to see them. By morning, I decided to find him. I needed to look him in the eye, to hear from his mouth why he'd done it. When I called his phone again, it went straight to voicemail. I tried the old landline, disconnected. It wasn't until noon that Ruth found the listing online. "Mom," she said quietly, scrolling through her phone. "The buyer's agent posted a video of the house for the sale ad. It's still up." She turned the screen toward me. There was my living room, my blue couch, my lace curtains, the family portrait above the mantel, all staged neatly for strangers to browse. And there in the background, for just a second before the video cut, was Thomas, standing by the kitchen counter, smiling at someone off camera. A woman's laugh echoed faintly before the screen went black. My stomach clenched. "That's not just a real estate agent," I said softly. Ruth's eyes met mine, wide and fearful. "Mom, do you think?" I didn't let her finish. I already knew what she was thinking. I'd been sick in a hospital bed while my husband sold our home. And from the look of that smile, he hadn't done it alone. I stood, shaky but certain. "Get me his address," I said, "wherever he's living now." Ruth hesitated. "Mom, maybe wait." "Get it," I repeated. "Please." She searched quietly, fingers trembling on her phone. When she looked up, her voice was barely a whisper. "He's in Oak Ridge Apartments. With someone named Claire." The name hit me like a door slamming shut. Claire Turner, his friend from work. The one he'd mentioned years ago, always in passing. Always so casually I'd never thought twice, until now. That was the moment I stopped being confused and started being angry. It was the kind of anger that doesn't shout. It simmers, quiet, cold, controlled, because I knew then, this wasn't just betrayal. It was theft of my home, my trust, and the life I built brick by brick beside him. And I intended to find out exactly how deep his lies went. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that brief flicker of Thomas on the video. The familiar slope of his shoulders, the way he leaned against the counter like he still owned the world. And then that laugh, soft and close, a woman's voice echoing through my head like a cruel melody. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to call. I wasn't going to beg for answers over the phone, like some stranger chasing scraps of truth. No, if he wanted to sell our life behind my back, then he was going to look me in the eye when I asked why. Ruth tried to talk me out of it. Of course. "Mom, you just got out of the hospital. You need rest, not confrontation." "I've had enough rest," I told her, pulling on my cardigan. "Now I need the truth." Oak Ridge Apartments sat on the other side of town, the newer part, where everything smelled like fresh paint and new money. As I walked up the polished steps to the building, I caught my reflection in the glass door, a woman who looked older than her years, tired but determined. The doorman nodded politely as I passed. "Visiting someone?" "Yes," I said. "Thomas Barlow, Unit 214. He glanced at the list. "Ah, Mr. Barlow, moved in a few weeks ago." That confirmed it. He hadn't even waited for me to recover. I knocked once, twice. No answer. The third time, the door opened just enough for me to hear a familiar voice. "Who is it?" "Thomas." I froze for a second. That voice, the same one that used to hum old Motown songs while making breakfast. The one that once told me he'd love me till his last breath. "It's me," I said quietly. "Open the door, Thomas." When he finally did, he looked startled. But not guilty, not immediately. Just surprised. Like someone who'd been caught off guard by a ghost from another life. "Helen," he said, blinking fast. "You are out already." Already? I stepped past him into the apartment before he could stop me. "How long was I supposed to stay, Thomas?" "Long enough for you to sell our house and play house with someone else." He flinched at that. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. The apartment was small, but tastefully furnished. Too tastefully for Thomas alone. Fresh flowers on the counter, new curtains, soft jazz playing from a speaker. And there, on the dining table, a mug with the name Claire printed in cursive. I picked it up, turning it in my hand. You didn't even bother to hide it, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Helen, please, you were sick. I didn't want to burden you with the finances. Don't you dare, I snapped. Don't you dare turn this into a favor. His voice lowered. We were drowning, Helen. The bills, the repairs, everything was falling apart. I had to make a choice. So you sold our home without even asking me. You moved in with her. I pointed to the mug. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the bedroom door. And that was all the answer I needed. I could feel the anger rising like a tide, pressing hot behind my eyes. Do you have any idea what it felt like? Coming home from surgery to find strangers living in my house? To be told it was an urgent sale? He looked away, ashamed. I didn't think you'd be out so soon. I let out a bitter laugh. That's what bothers you, that I came back too early. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if there were no words big enough to cover what he'd done. I took one last look around that shiny apartment, the soft rug, the art on the walls, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine, and something inside me shifted. The kind of shift that happens when you realize you're done pleading for decency from someone who's already decided you don't matter. When I walked out, I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look back. I just went straight to the bus stop, sat down, and let the silence wrap around me like armor. That was when I decided to find out everything, every document, every lie, every penny that had changed hands. If Thomas wanted to treat me like I was powerless, he was about to learn that I was anything but. The next morning, I went to the county records office. The clerk, a young woman with red glasses, looked up when I handed her the address of our old home. Can you tell me who signed the sale deed? I asked. She clicked away on her computer for a few moments before frowning slightly. Looks like it was sold by both parties, Thomas and Helen Barlow. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. I didn't sign anything. She turned the screen so I could see. There it was, my name, neatly printed and signed, my signature. Only, it wasn't mine. For a moment, the room tilted. My ears buzzed, my fingers went cold. He hadn't just sold the house. He'd forged my signature to do it. Can I get a copy of that deed? I asked, my voice barely steady. Of course, she said, printing it out. Do you need it for legal purposes? Not yet, I said, but soon. That night, I sat at Ruth's kitchen table with the document spread before me. I traced the lines of the fake signature, my own name written by someone else's hand, and something inside me hardened. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was fraud, theft, and while I'd spent weeks recovering in a hospital bed, he'd been out there, playing the dutiful husband to another woman while robbing me blind. Ruth read over my shoulder, her face pale. Mom, this is criminal. You could go to the police. I could, I said quietly, but not yet. Why not? Because I want to know how deep it goes, who helped him, and why he thought he'd get away with it. I spent the next few days making calls, digging through old bank statements and files. I found transfers I'd never authorized, small withdrawals at first, then larger ones, all under Thomas's name. The more I found, the clearer the picture became. This hadn't been a sudden decision. He'd been planning it for months, maybe even years. And the worst part, he'd used my hospital stay as the perfect cover. By the end of the week, I'd gathered enough to know what had to come next. It was time to confront the woman in the background of that video, Claire Turner. Not out of jealousy, not even for revenge, but because I needed to hear it from her own mouth. I needed to know what story Thomas had told her to make her part of this cruel performance. And I intended to look her straight in the eyes when I did. Claire Turner lived in a quiet cul-de-sac just outside town. The kind of place with trimmed lawns, bird feeders, and neighbors who waved too eagerly. Her house stood out, not for its size, but for its warmth. Pale yellow curtains, flower pots on the porch, a welcome mat that said, "Home is where love lives." I remember thinking how ironic that was. I didn't bother calling ahead. I wanted to see her face when she realized who I was. When she opened the door, she was exactly what I expected. Younger than me by maybe 10 years, wearing a soft blue sweater, and a look that said she recognized my name before I even spoke it. "Claire Turner?" I asked. "Yes." Her voice trailed off as her eyes flicked to the papers in my hand. "And you are?" "Helen Barlow, Thomas's wife." Her face drained of color. "Oh, he told me you were, what?" "Gone. Dying, out of the picture." I cut in. "Let's not pretend we don't both know what's going on." She swallowed hard and stepped aside. "Please, come in." The living room was simple, cozy, pictures on the mantel, 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, still half full. A man's jacket lay draped over the couch. "Is he here?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, he left early this morning. Said he needed to clear his head." I sat down without waiting for permission. "Then let's clear the air instead." She folded her arms, shifting from foot to foot. "Helen, I didn't know, not at first. He told me you two were separated, that you'd moved in with your daughter." I gave a dry laugh. "That's one way to describe a hospital bed." Her eyes widened. "Hospital?" "I had surgery. I was there for weeks. The day I came home, strangers were moving into my house." Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. "Oh my God. I swear I didn't know it was like that. He said the house was his to sell." I slid the forged deed across the table. "He said a lot of things, didn't he?" She looked at it, then at me, tears starting to form. "I'm so sorry. I thought he was divorced. He said you took everything and left him broke." I exhaled slowly, steadying my voice. "That's how he always works. He plays the victim, then he cleans out what's left of your trust." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of her wall clock. Finally, Claire whispered, "I know this won't make a difference now, but he's been taking money from me too." That caught my attention. "How much?" "Almost everything I had in savings," she said quietly. "He said he was investing it, something about flipping properties." I didn't question it. I nodded, my jaw tight. "And now you see what kind of investment he meant." She sank into a chair, trembling. "He promised me a life, said we'd start over somewhere new. He even showed me pictures of the house he was buying for us." "Let me guess," I said, leaning back. "The same one he sold from under me." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. There was a soft knock on the door just then. Claire froze, her eyes darting to the hallway. "It's him," she whispered. "Good," I said, standing. "Let him in." When Thomas walked through that door, time seemed to slow. He stopped short when he saw me, his expression flickering from confusion to alarm. "Helen, what are you doing here?" I smiled faintly. "Catching up with your business partner." Claire's voice shook. "Thomas, she knows. About the house, about the money." He ran a hand over his face, muttering, "Oh, for God's sake." I stepped closer. "Save the performance. I've got the deed, the forged signature, and the bank transfers. You didn't just betray me, Thomas. You committed fraud." His tone hardened. "I did what I had to do." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You saw my hospital stay as a window of opportunity. You thought you could sell the house, pocket the money, and move on before I woke up." He opened his mouth, but Claire's voice sliced through the air. "Is it true, Thomas? Did you lie to both of us?" He turned toward her, guilt flashing across his face. "Claire, please." "Answer me," she shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You told me she was gone." He hesitated too long. That was enough. I looked at him then, really looked. The man standing before me wasn't the one I'd married 20 years ago. He wasn't the one who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen, who held my hand through the birth of our daughter. No, this was someone hollow, someone who'd traded love for convenience, truth for greed. Do you know what hurts the most? I said softly. It's not losing the house. It's realizing you sold every piece of who we were just to keep your lies standing. He stared back, speechless. I gathered my things and turned toward the door. I'll be in touch, through my lawyer. His voice cracked behind me. Helen, wait, we can fix this. I paused, hand on the doorknob. You can't fix what you sold, Thomas. Outside, the afternoon sun was sharp and cold. I walked to the curb, heart pounding, but there was something else mixed in now. Relief. The kind that comes when you stop holding on to something rotten. I stood there a while, watching the leaves drift across the street, and realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid anymore. Thomas had stolen my home, yes, but he hadn't taken my strength. And that, I decided, was going to be his downfall. That night, Ruth found me at the kitchen table again, this time with a new folder of papers. Mom, you're not going to let this go, are you? No, I said simply. He took my roof. I'll take his mask. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still, the air cool with that faint metallic scent that lingers before dawn. I sat by the window, a mug of tea in my hands, and watched the world stretch awake, unaware that mine had just collapsed. But collapse isn't the same as surrender. I'd spent my life patching broken things, a leaky roof, a scraped knee, a husband's bad temper. This time would be no different, except this time I wouldn't be fixing him. I'd be fixing what he broke. By 7, I was on the phone with a lawyer Ruth had found through a friend, a woman named Miriam Grant, known for her calm voice and merciless precision in court. When I met her that afternoon, she listened quietly, her pen moving steadily as I told her everything. The sale, the forged documents, the hospital stay. When I finished, she looked up, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Mrs. Barlow, she said, your husband didn't just betray you. He committed a crime, multiple crimes. Fraud, forgery, misappropriation of assets. The law is on your side. I exhaled for the first time that day. So what do we do? She smiled faintly. We start by freezing the account where that money went. Then we talk to the buyers. If they acted in good faith, they may help us reverse the sale. But first, she leaned forward. We make sure he knows you're not the same woman he walked over. That evening, Ruth and I drove to Thomas's office. It was a real estate firm he'd opened 3 years ago, one of those small-town setups with shiny brochures and motivational posters about building dreams. When I walked in, his secretary looked up nervously, already aware something was wrong. Is Mr. Barlow in? I asked, my tone polite but firm. She nodded. He's in a meeting. I gave her a thin smile. Not anymore. Before she could protest, I pushed open the glass door. Thomas was there, sitting across from a couple holding blueprints, prospective clients. His smile faltered the moment he saw me. Excuse me, he stammered, rising from his chair. I crossed the room, every step echoing against the polished floor. Don't mind me. I just came to introduce myself, Thomas's wife. The one he forgot to mention. The couple glanced at each other awkwardly. I turned to them, my voice steady. If you're planning to buy property through him, I suggest you run a background check first. He has a talent for selling things that aren't his. Thomas's face flushed red. Helen, stop. Oh, I will, I said, sliding a document onto the table. After you explain this forged deed to the police. I've already filed a complaint. You'll be hearing from them soon. His clients quietly gathered their things and left, murmuring apologies. When the door closed, Thomas's voice dropped. You're humiliating me. Humiliation, I said coldly, is the least you deserve. He slammed a hand on the table. "You're making a scene for nothing. You'll ruin both of us." I looked him in the eye. "You already did that the moment you signed my name." By the end of that week, the story was out. The police called him in for questioning, and his firm's reputation crumbled faster than I'd imagined. Word spread, first through colleagues, then neighbors, then the community. People whispered. His clients withdrew. Even his own brother stopped taking his calls. But I didn't gloat. I just watched him unravel, the same way he'd watched me struggle to breathe after surgery. Still, I wasn't after revenge, not really. What I wanted was justice and closure. Miriam kept me grounded. "Remember, Helen," she said during one of our meetings, "the goal isn't to destroy him. It's to reclaim what's rightfully yours and your peace." I nodded, though part of me wanted him to feel every ounce of the helplessness he'd caused me. One afternoon, I got a call from Claire. Her voice trembled on the line. "I ended things with him," she said. "I told him I was done. He's been calling, showing up at my door, begging for forgiveness." I sighed. "He'll beg until he finds someone new to lie to." "I know," she whispered. "I just wanted to say thank you for not hating me." I softened. "You were lied to, just like I was." We both built homes out of words he never meant. There was silence. Then she said quietly, "He's broke, Helen, completely. The account he used, it's empty. I think he moved the money before the freeze hit." My stomach tightened. "Where to?" "I don't know. But I saw a message on his phone from some man, a buyer in another city. It sounded shady." I thanked her and hung up, heart pounding. This wasn't over. The next day, I went through his old office files, copies Ruth had managed to get before he locked everything up. In one folder labeled Projects, I found a receipt for a wire transfer, the same amount as our house sale, sent to an offshore account under a fake company name. Miriam's voice echoed in my head. Fraud, forgery, misappropriation. I gathered every document, every screenshot, every shred of proof, and walked them straight to the police. The officer nodded grimly. "You've done most of our work for us, Mrs. Barlow. We'll take it from here." Weeks passed. The nights were long and heavy with thoughts that came in waves. Grief, anger, disbelief. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could rot so quietly, so completely, without either of us noticing. Then one morning, Miriam called. "They found the funds," she said. "The account was frozen. You'll get your share back, and the sale will likely be voided. The buyers have agreed to cooperate." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, tears pooling silently. Justice hadn't come easy, but it had come. That evening, I walked past the old house. The new owners were moving out, boxes stacked by the porch. I stood across the street, hidden by the shadow of an oak tree, and watched as sunlight fell across the windows. The same windows I used to open every morning to let the air in. For the first time, I didn't ache. I just remembered. That home was never just walls or wood. It was the laughter, the meals, the mornings I thought would last forever. Thomas sold the structure, yes, but the life we lived inside it, that would always be mine. When I got back to Ruth's, she met me at the door. "Mom," she said softly, "the police called. They arrested Dad." I nodded slowly. "Then it's gone." But deep down, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the start of something quieter, something stronger. When the news of Thomas's arrest spread, it felt like a slow, heavy rain over the town. Soft at first, then relentless. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down every aisle. At church, sympathetic eyes found me before the service even began. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. That mix of pity and disbelief that always trails behind a public scandal. I didn't want pity. I wanted peace. The day after the arrest, I went to the courthouse. He sat there in the waiting area, his hands cuffed, wearing that same gray suit he once used to charm buyers and bankers alike. But now it hung loose, like it didn't belong to him anymore. When he saw me, his shoulders tensed. He didn't speak, not at first. "I suppose you're happy now," he muttered finally. I took a seat across from him. "No, Thomas. Happiness has nothing to do with this." His eyes flickered, still full of that tired arrogance. "You could have handled this quietly. But you wanted to destroy me." I shook my head. "You destroyed yourself the moment you forgot what trust meant." He looked away, jaw tight. "I did it for us. We were drowning in bills, Helen. You were in the hospital. I didn't know if you'd make it." I panicked. "For us." I leaned forward, voice low. "Then why send the money offshore? Why start a new life with Claire while pretending I didn't exist?" He opened his mouth, but no words came, just silence, thick and bitter. Finally, I stood. "I didn't come here to gloat. I came to say goodbye." And I left before he could see the tears breaking free down my face. Outside, the autumn air carried a strange calm. Leaves rustled underfoot, gold and brown, whispering like old friends who knew every version of me. The young bride, the mother, the betrayed woman. Now, I was something else entirely. Ruth met me by the car. "You okay?" I managed a small smile. "Better than I was yesterday." In the weeks that followed, things shifted, slowly, quietly, like sunlight creeping back after a long storm. Neighbors who once spoke in hushed tones now waved again. Some even stopped by with casseroles and soft apologies. "We didn't know," they'd say. "We're so sorry you went through that." And I'd smile, accepting their kindness, but not their guilt. Because truth be told, I wasn't angry at them, not anymore. Betrayal isolates you, but healing reminds you you're not alone. Miriam called one morning with an update. "Thomas took a plea deal. Minimal jail time, but he'll have to pay restitution. You'll be compensated in full." I thanked her, then sat there in silence after the call, letting the words settle. Compensation. Justice. Closure. But none of those words meant what I thought they would. Because no amount of money could restore the years or the trust. What it gave me instead was freedom. A few months later, the house went back on the market. I drove by one last time before it sold again. The yard had overgrown, the garden unkempt, yet I smiled at the sight. It wasn't mine anymore, and that was okay. Ruth stood beside me, arms folded. "You could have fought to move back in, you know." I shook my head gently. Some doors, once closed, are better left that way. She smiled softly. "You're stronger than I thought, Mom." I looked at her, my daughter, my anchor, and said, "No, sweetheart. I just finally remembered who I was before I forgot myself for someone else." The small-town gossip eventually faded, replaced by new scandals and fresher faces. Life, as it always does, moved on. I began volunteering at the hospital where I'd once been a patient, sitting beside women recovering from surgeries, listening to their stories, holding their hands when words failed. It was strange how familiar their pain felt. Different stories, same ache. Sometimes they'd ask, "How did you survive all that?" And I'd smile gently and say, "By remembering that no one can sell your spirit, not even the person who broke your heart." One quiet evening, months later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name in his handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Helen, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I was caught, but because I see now what I destroyed. You were my home long before that house ever was." Thomas. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you grant for the other person's sake. It's something you choose for your own peace. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept without bitterness pressing on my chest. By spring, Ruth and I moved into a small cottage near the coast. Simple, quiet, with wildflowers along the path and sunlight spilling through the curtains each morning. Sometimes when the breeze carries the scent of salt and fresh linen, I think of all that was lost and all that was found in its place. A home can be taken from you, but peace, that you build yourself. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in quietly, like sunlight through the blinds after a long, sleepless night. In the months that followed Thomas's arrest and confession, I lived in that little seaside cottage with Ruth. It wasn't grand, just 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, and a tiny kitchen that smelled of coffee and old wood. But it was ours, and that was enough. I started every morning with a cup of tea on the porch, watching the tide pull in and out. The sound of the sea became my new heartbeat, steady, patient, forgiving. Some days, the pain still surfaced. I'd remember how I used to run my hands along the kitchen counters of our old home, proud that we built it together. I'd remember the laughter in those rooms, and how it echoed long after he stopped being kind. But instead of running from those memories, I learned to sit with them. Healing, I discovered, isn't about erasing what hurt you. It's about learning to live alongside it, without letting it define you. One afternoon, I found Ruth in the living room, surrounded by paint cans and half-finished sketches. She looked up with a grin. "I got the job, Mom. The art therapy position at the Children's Center." I couldn't help it. I burst into tears. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from finally seeing life bloom again after a long winter. "You deserve this, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tight. "You've carried more than your share." She smiled, pressing her forehead against mine. "So have you." In that moment, I realized that while Thomas had broken something between us, he hadn't destroyed us. The love Ruth and I shared, the resilience we built together, was stronger than his betrayal. Weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from the realtor handling the sale of the old house, the same house Thomas had sold behind my back. The new owners were hosting a neighborhood tea, and they wanted to invite the woman who first made the home. At first, I laughed softly to myself. What an odd twist of fate. But that night, as I sat watching the moonlight ripple over the water, I decided I'd go, not to reclaim anything, but to release it. The day of the tea, I wore a pale blue dress and my mother's pearl earrings. When I walked up the familiar path, memories flooded me, the laughter that once filled those walls, the nights I cried myself to sleep, the mornings that smelled of pancakes and hope. A young couple greeted me warmly at the door. "You must be Mrs. Sanders. We've heard so much about you. Everyone says you planted the roses out front." I smiled. "Yes, and I'm glad they're still standing." The house had changed, new paint, new furniture, but the bones were the same. As I wandered through, my fingers brushed the banister I once polished every Sunday. I paused by the window that used to frame our Christmas tree, and instead of pain, I felt gratitude. That chapter had ended. Painfully, yes, but it had led me here, to peace, to purpose, to freedom. When I left, the wife pressed a small rose into my hand. "From your garden," she said with a smile. I took it, tears stinging my eyes. "Thank you. It's good to see it still blooming." That night, I set the rose in a glass of water by my bed. I looked at it for a long time, at its soft petals, its fragile strength, and realized it was a perfect symbol of everything I'd become. Once broken, yes, but still capable of beauty. Months passed, and life found its rhythm again. I joined a small women's circle at the community center. Widows, divorcees, and mothers, all carrying their own stories of loss and rebuilding. We'd sit in a circle of mismatched chairs, sharing tea and truth. One evening, I told them my story, about the house, the betrayal, and the quiet road to forgiveness. When I finished, one of the women, a retired nurse, leaned forward and said softly, "You speak about him without hate. How did you manage that?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Because hate only ties you to the person who hurt you. Forgiveness, that's how you cut the rope." The room went still, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that maybe my pain had purpose. Maybe my voice could help someone else find their way back to themselves. The sea became my companion in those final reflections. Every sunset reminded me that even endings could be beautiful. Every wave reminded me that life always moves forward, not back. I still kept Thomas's letter tucked away in that drawer. Not as a wound, but as proof that even the ones who break us can, in their own way, teach us what strength looks like. He had taken a house, but in losing that, I found a home within myself, a place no one could sell, steal, or destroy. And that, I think, is what true healing means. Now, when people ask me what happened, I tell them simply, I lost everything I thought I needed, and found everything I truly was. Then I smile, look out toward the horizon, and whisper a quiet prayer for anyone still trapped in their own kind of storm. Because if my story proves anything, it's this. You can survive betrayal. You can start again, and you can build something even stronger from what was broken.